you can't really grow if you are doing everything, because you don't have the space mentally or physically to be able to take on any more work or to focus on how you're going to build your business and create this business that you really want to create.
In this week's episode of the Happy Lawyer, Happy Life podcast, I was with Kristal Naividi. Kristal was down on the central coast of New South Wales. I was up in Brisbane, so we were definitely not hanging out together. She's in the midst of a lockdown, so sorry, Kristal. The joy that has been 2020 and 2021, but we didn't talk about that. We instead, of course, chose to talk about life in the law, how Kristal's found her way to starting her own firm just before COVID hit last year, and what that's meant for her having young children and trying to juggle all of the joys that come with running a primarily criminal and family law practice. Kristal's had a really interesting life story and kindly shared some of that with me in this chat. But I guess what I really took from talking with her is she's got such a beautiful perspective on life, a wonderful mindset. I imagine would be a wonderful friend to have in your life, really positive, optimistic, seems like a hell of a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed the chance to speak with Kristal and learn a little bit more about how she's got her place to being a mostly happy lawyer running a really cool little practice.
Hello, welcome to my mummy's show. This show is about being happy. happy.
This is the Happy Lawyer, Happy Life podcast.
Thank you so much, Kristal, for coming and joining the Happy Lawyer, Happy Life podcast all the way from the Central Coast. If only you and I could hang out together. But are you in lockdown? You must be in the zone.
We are in lockdown, so I don't think you'd want to hang out. Much better to be where you are.
Oh, I don't know. Only a week ago we were in lockdown too. So I think it's, it just is such a moving feast for all of us. You've got no capacity to predict anything at the moment. It's crazy.
You just have to surrender.
So just on that, what are your lockdown tips before we get into this interview? What's working?
Oh, geez. I don't know what's working. We're just surviving. I think just lower the expectations. You can only achieve so much in a day when you've got kids and work. And so I think just doing the important stuff first and the rest just has to sort of wait. It's all about that balance.
Well, I love that you and I are on a video talking to each other as we do this recording. You've got dressed. You have a suit jacket on.
I do. I've got a beautiful.
You're like, I'm going to work in my office at home.
I think I'm dressing up today.
Yeah, you're much better than me. When I do lockdown, I'm like, all right, Lorna Jane, here we go.
Oh, right. No, I always get up, put the makeup on. It just makes me feel like I'm half, I've achieved something.
Things
or just hang out. I was the same when I had newborns. I would just, wake up that early, have a shower, put my makeup on, because I'd think, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but at least I've gotten dressed and
keep some of that routine. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go off on a tangent, let's come back to our usual first question, which it always is, if you weren't a lawyer, what would you be?
I think in a former life or another life, I'd be a singer. I'm obsessed with music. I'm always singing. It's just so good, food for the soul, but I can't actually sing very well, so I don't think that would actually end up well for me. Probably a psychologist. Yeah, I've always wanted to pursue psychology or some sort of, counselling or something like that. I'm just fascinated by people's journeys and their life stories. So I think that would have probably been my other option.
And I suspect this will very much link in as we learn more about your own life story and how you've got to where you are in the law.
Yeah.
But I think I really agree with you there. And I think working in law really brought this home for me as well, that it's so interesting how our early life experiences and the chances that life throws at us or takes away from us so shape the direction that individuals go. It's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, fascinates me.
So let's go right back. You grew up in Sydney and you were just giving me a geography lesson a little bit because I'm terrible with Sydney. So tell me a little bit more about your early life.
So I grew up in the eastern suburbs, and I think I was saying to you before we started recording, there's sort of two sides to the eastern suburbs. There's the nice Bondi icebergs and all of the landmarks that people are aware of, and then there's another landmark, the Long Bay Jail, and so I lived opposite that. in public housing. So it was quite an interesting and colourful place to live. It's only looking back that I realised, there were people clearly who were on parole because they had ankle bracelets and people with mental health. It was a large unit complex. So the people you would see was actually just quite fascinating. But yeah, looking back with that adult perspective, it's also probably quite dangerous at looking back.
I didn't realise the Long Bay Jail was so central in Sydney.
Yeah.
I sort of used, like up here in Brisbane, the majority of the prison facilities are sort of outside of the city as such. You've got to jump in a car and drive a good 40 minutes at least to get to them.
That's right.
So that's really
interesting. Residential literally overlooks, the fences of
wow.
the jail. And I remember times there would be, someone had escaped or something, or they were worried someone was on the loose, so you'd be a bit like, oh, okay. Your own time.
Stay in today.
It was the original lockdown.
So did you manage to get up to Bondi with regularity? Is that how weekends were spent? I'm trying to just visualise.
Yeah.
I genuinely have no sense of geography right now. So I'm just like, they must be
around,
close.
Coogee, Maroubra, all of those sorts of areas is where all of my friends sort of live. So I spent a lot of my time there. Yeah.
It sounds like a lovely place, actually.
It's really beautiful in terms of, the visuals. It's stunning.
I know you've spoken in other interviews that you've done, and I was just saying to you, I sort of heard about you through an interview that you did with the College of Law earlier this year about your own lived experience growing up, and it perhaps wasn't the easiest of childhoods, but it sounds like that has very much influenced your desire to head into the law.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a colourful childhood and perhaps saw things that children shouldn't. But looking back, it's given me incredible insights into the struggles, I guess, that people go through and the journeys that sort of lead people to where they are, particularly doing criminal and family law. I think because I've got that lived experience as well in terms of the struggles that clients perhaps face in terms of family violence and family members in custody and mental illness, all of those things sort of shaped the person that I am. So I've perhaps got a very empathetic approach when dealing with clients with those same struggles.
So when was the moment? Was there a moment? When did you say, this is the path that I want to take? I'm not going to be a singer.
The singing's not going to
be a lawyer.
Just stick to the pub karaoke. I always wanted to do it, but I had this struggle where I didn't know how I could go to uni full time. And so I had just sort of surrendered to the fact that, well, I can't do that because I have to work to be able to pay my rent. I'd sort of supported myself from when I was 16 years old. So I got a job in a law firm as a legal secretary and thought, oh, well, that's the next best step. At least I get to, immerse myself in the law. I'd loved legal studies, so I thought that'll work for me. And luckily, my boss had said to me, have you heard of the diploma in law through the LPAB? And I had something I hadn't heard of, and I looked into it, and I realised I could work full time, study and do weekend schools, I enrolled and I was able to do my law that way, and then did College of Law, did my PLT through the College of Law, and then now also doing my master's through the College of Law. So yeah, it sort of just worked out. That one conversation set me on the right path, so to speak.
It's funny, isn't it? Like all these different pathways that lead to the same place, but you don't really know that they exist unless someone says to you, well, by the way, you don't have to go to university. There's this other way.
That's right.
It's not that it's not a university, but it's just a different way of studying, really.
That's right, yeah. And the amount of people who have sort of, since then I've had conversations with who also thought, oh, well, I can't do law for whatever reasons. I've said, look at this course because it's that other way to do it. I guess that non-linear path. It's
the legal, you just gave the abbreviation, but it's the legal
Professions Admissions Board who do that in conjunction with Sydney Uni.
And so what's the central difference between that program and, say, going through a Bachelor of Laws at Sydney University?
For me, it was that you don't have HECS, so you had to pay each subject up front, which was fine because I was working. It's also a diploma in law, so it's not an undergraduate degree. So I guess that stigma about, undergraduate or graduate degree versus diploma. But at the end of the day, I'm still going on to get my master's, so it really doesn't particularly matter personally for me as well. And I guess it's straight law. So you're not sort of studying something else with it, which perhaps I probably would have liked now, an arts degree in there or some other creative subjects. It's only law. So you're doing all the law
the
subjects.
Hardcore stuff.
Yeah, the contracts and the tax. Oh, I still shudder.
Yeah. Anyone that's listened to all 200 and something episodes of this show will know that I was deeply passionate about my law subjects. Not.
Yeah. You just have to get through.
Oh, yeah, completely. It's like, tick the box. Okay, past that. We'll never open that book again.
We'll never do that area. It's a great insight into what areas of law you do not want to do.
Yeah, and I have friends that still quote things that they learned at university 20 years ago, and I look at them and think, wow, that is a real skill set.
I know.
I don't have that skill set. So your first role in a law firm, you said before you were a legal secretary. What sort of areas of law was that firm practicing in?
So it was really a generalised suburban practice at Maroubra. They did family law and conveyancing, all sorts of things. So it was really great in terms of my exposure to all the different areas of law as well. And then as I was studying, I realised I wanted to perhaps move into the criminal law. And so I saw a job advertised with the DPP, and so I was able to apply for that and sort of stayed there for a very long time, 12 years or so.
Tell me about life at the DPP. Is it just like Crownies, the TV show?
A little bit not. No,
I'm waiting for someone to say yes. I ask everyone that's worked at the DPP.
I
Is
know.
it just like Crownies? Do I get to be Janet King? How does this work?
It is an incredible place to work, though. The people that you work with are just so incredibly passionate, and I've made so many wonderful friends from having worked at that place, and just the work that you get to do and are exposed to. I mean, it's incredibly traumatic sometimes, but it's also incredibly rewarding when you've worked on a case and then you see a great outcome for a victim. So
12 years at the DPP?
Yeah. Yep. So I was able to sort of work my way up I started in admin and then did my PLT and then was a junior lawyer there and then slowly worked my way up and worked at Sydney, Parramatta and Gosford offices. So I sort of got around and became part of the furniture.
And were you ultimately a prosecutor with the DPP or in those sorts of advocacy roles?
Yeah, I was. So appeared in, the district court and the local court, and then also instructing sort of in Supreme Court murders and things like that. So I got such a great experience and exposure to, all the different jurisdictions and areas of the criminal law.
That, I suspect on one hand is such interesting work, but on the other hand must be very confronting work. And we know that the vicarious trauma piece that sits with criminal law is really significant. What was your experience and how did you manage those sorts of, I guess, the more tricky parts of taking on those types of roles?
I think for myself, because I'd come from a particular upbringing, certain things weren't as shocking to me as perhaps if I'd lived a more sheltered life. So for me, I was able to take those things almost in my stride. And perhaps because of my upbringing, I've got a really good ability to be able to sort of detach from situations. So I always was able to sort of leave work at work. And I didn't find that it affected me too much. Once having young children, though, I did start to find that certain cases would start to affect me more, or I would start to have those thoughts creeping in, imagine if that happened to my child, or starting to personalise it. And I think once I started to get to that point, I realised that perhaps I needed to get away from the more serious offences and crimes, and that's when I had the idea, that maybe it was time to go out on my own.
And so you make that decision and start your own firm, that's the one that you're running now, I'm assuming. They're one and the same. Yeah.
Yep.
When was that, Kristal, that you opened Coastal Lawyers?
So I opened Coastal Lawyers 6 weeks before COVID. So that was
great.
After my wonderful, comfortable government job with all of those securities and benefits.
No.
But actually, it was the right time for me. I mean, I did have a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I don't know why I think it was
Perfect time.
child.
Yeah, why not start a business?
But it was actually perfect because it allowed me that flexibility to, be a mum and then also start the business. So I'd sort of planned to have 6 months maternity leave, and then I knew I had 6 months worth of wages to sort of cover me for that first little period. So it actually worked out perfectly.
And you're in lockdown for a chunk of it, so you
That's
didn't
right.
have to spend much money.
That's right. Yeah. So I've been incredibly fortunate that it's worked out so far, but I'm still in its infancy, so we'll see.
So describe to me then, I guess, the day in the life of, when you're not in lockdown, day in life of Coastal Lawyers, your role, the business generally.
Yeah, so it usually starts off very early. I wake up at about 4:30 in the morning, and that's largely because I have young kids, and so the ability to be able to get things done in those early hours when sort of no one wants anything of me is really powerful to me. I love starting the day off with meditation, so I always start the day off that way, and then I feel like I've had some time for me, which is great for my headspace, and do a few hours of work, and then it's all about getting kids to school and daycare and all of those fun things. And then I've got an office in Gosford, and I've also have some staff members now, which is exciting. And so it involves a lot of court appearances because I do the family law and the criminal law, so a lot of days are spent in court. Otherwise, in the office.
Nice. What were your learnings as you set up the firm last year and launched it?
One of my biggest learnings, actually, and that's probably why I've now have staff, is I loved the collegiality at the DPP. It was the power of the people to, share an email that you'd received or to share a win at court, those things which I really missed during that first 6 months when it was sort of just me in lockdown, trying to look after 3 children, probably added to the stress. So that was really important to me, to build a team and to create a workplace where people are really excited to go to work and value the work that they're doing. So that's been one of my biggest sort of learnings for me personally, is I need that. As much as I'm an introvert and need to have time to myself to re-energize, I also need the people around me to sort of make it fun.
I think that's a really interesting reflection, because it's so often the case that when we're trying to start a new business, you tend to not be in a position where you can start with a team of 10. You're starting and you're gradually adding people as you can grow the business and afford to do so, really.
Yeah.
But that's a really interesting insight, and it's something that I discovered about myself as well a few years ago, when I was in a bit of I'm not sure whether I want to keep being a lawyer. Do I need this law firm? All of these things, and came to the realization that one of the things that I do really enjoy is the team of people that I work with, and I actually couldn't be, let's say, a barrister or a solopreneur and not have people around me. That's a really joyful part. But knowing when to add team members, I think, to a brand new law firm is a question I'm always being asked. When do I hire the first person, Clarissa? What's the moment? What's the sort of test where you say, now's the time to add the person? What's been your experience in when were the moments where you went, no, I really need some help right now?
I think once I realized that I didn't want to actually create myself a job where I was in the same position where I didn't actually have the flexibility to go and see my children's school events or to leave early to pick them up or things like that. I didn't want to be so overworked because I had all of this work to do. And so my first hire was an admin assistant, Sarah, who's now my practice manager, to be able to take off all of those things which perhaps aren't in my stroke of genius anyway, and things which she can then make her own. So that's been so powerful, because a lot of that admin really is so important, but yet it bogs you down and you're not actually doing, legal work, which is what you probably enjoy doing the most. You're getting caught up in invoicing, or are you writing emails or drafting letters? I mean, it's really hard when you start out on your own. You're everyone. I quickly realised how much I loved the IT department at the DPP, because they were on speed dial and I continually had IT problems, and it was me who all of a sudden apparently had to sort it out. So I think you quickly realise when you need to hire someone, and you just have to be brave. You can't really grow if you are doing everything, because you don't have the space mentally or physically to be able to take on any more work or to focus on how you're going to build your business and create this business that you really want to create.
I think that's exactly right. When I am asked the question, who's the first person I should hire, I always say someone that manages your finances. And
Yeah,
that's not the accountant, like you need an accountant. I'm not
yeah,
suggesting otherwise, but it's what you just mentioned there. It's that invoicing piece, and that if you're running a trust account, managing those things,
that's
and
right.
that sort of back end stuff that many of us don't have to manage when we're in employed roles. They're just not even things that you know about. And then you
No,
suddenly start a business, and unless you're issuing invoices, you don't get paid.
that's
So
right. Cash flow is
you've got
big.
to do it.
So you're too
Yeah.
busy to invoice, but the problem is you need an invoice to be able to survive the next week. So yeah, the admin has really helped. And Sarah was actually retraining. She was originally in childcare. She had 3 babies who are all at school, and so now she's doing a traineeship in
Great.
in legal services. And so it's actually worked out perfectly because she's been able to get the on the job experience. I've been able to get this amazing assistance. We work well together. So it's been, such an asset.
Is there anything that you've, I guess, done that with the benefit of hindsight, you'd be like, yeah, no, that wasn't the most helpful thing in the context of trying to start a law firm?
Being too available. When you first start, you want to be everything to everyone. You want to be available 24/7. You'll help anyone who comes through the door. And you quickly realize that you don't want to work with everybody and you don't have to say yes to everyone and be available to grow your business. So the personal boundaries has been so important. It's certainly hard in those early days because you do need to get money through the door, but focusing on the right types of clients that you want to work with and the ones you're going to be able to help. Because if the client isn't a right fit energetically, you're not going to be able to help them. So they're not going to go out and rave about how fantastic you are because it's not going to be a right fit. So I think as scary as it is to say no to work, choosing the right people to work with and then getting great referral bases. So if you don't want to work with that particular person or you don't think you can help them, having someone you can refer them to because you're still helping them, and then you create these really mutually beneficial relationships where you can refer each other, and that's part of that community as well, creating that tribe.
Great tip. Life when you're not being a lawyer. Tell
Yeah.
me about it.
Well, I've got 3 little ones, as I've mentioned, 3 boys under the age of 6. So life is really busy. There's lots of bread and cereal. I so I don't know how much children
Bread and
eat.
cereal.
They are the staples in our house every day: bread, cereal, and milk. And so there's lots of wrestling as well. And I really had to surrender to toilet humor. So it's all about toilet humor as well. So learning quite a lot.
It's so funny. I have a house of girls, and
Ah,
and my husband, obviously. And it's just a completely different experience. And I've got some friends staying with me at the moment, and their son, who's 11. And yeah, I was saying to my husband, I was like, "Oh God, it's a whole different thing when you've got young boys in the house."
oh, it really is. The energy is so high level.
Yeah.
And when I like sort of more of a calmer energy, I've really had to embrace the chaos. So it's been quite a quite a journey coming to the boys. But they're beautiful because they're the future and they're the men of the future. And so I find it such a privilege to be able to guide these little people in life.
Something that is often also asked of those of us that have families and are running businesses in law is that multi-million-dollar question of how do you do it all? What do you say when people ask you, "Oh, Kristal, looks like you've got it all under control"? How do you do it all?
Well, I don't do it all. It's just organized chaos. And then each day, I think, like I said before, I'm just picking the big things that have to be done. And then I'm prioritizing. So I've got things which are super important to me, seeing the kids after school and putting them to bed. That's one of my priorities. So that's something that I make sure I try not to work past, 4:30. And then I'll jump back on the computer in the night if I need to get something done. So it's just making sure that it's a priority, I guess, in terms of what has to be done in a particular day. But it's certainly not easy. But if you're passionate about being a mum and you're passionate about your business, you just make it work.
You've got, I sense, a real "it just is and I just get on with it" attitude
It is what
to
it
all
is.
of this. Yeah.
Yeah. And what you resist persists. You just have to surrender and go with the flow. So that's very much my approach. The minute you start wishing things are a different way, that's when you start finding you get quite frustrated.
I'm writing that quote down. What you resist persists.
Yes.
You would have just seen me reach through the pen and paper. You're like, what's she up to? Just writing that one down. Thank you very much.
I think I learned that during, one of those things you start reading when you're learning about having a baby. And they speak about the contractions and they're like, what resists persists. And it's so true, because when you surrender, it's much easier. But when you resist, it's much more jarring. So
yeah, look, I'm not a human that enjoys either being pregnant nor having babies. So I am the last person to give any advice in that space, other than to say probably read the books that Kristal just suggested, because I didn't read a thing, and that was my failing right there. I was like, if I just pretend this is not happening, the baby will eventually come out and I'll get on with my life. Yeah, no, it's actually not that great. Benefit of hindsight.
But it's
some knowledge would be good.
Experience, I think that's what gave me courage to start a business too. You think, if I can be pregnant and then look after these children and do all of these things, then I can really do anything. It kind of just puts life in perspective. Things don't seem as scary in some respects.
Yeah. And I think, I'm really interested in this opening of the business part of your career, because around us at the moment, there are so many women particularly opening law firms.
Yeah.
And I've said it a few times on the show, I'm really interested in doing some research in this space, because what I see at the moment is many more women starting from scratch in the same way that you have, where they step out of whatever the role was that they had, from, literally build my shingle, here I go, from scratch, build a business. And that is tough going. But the choice is usually driven from a place of the life that I'm after looks a particular way, and therefore I need my career to fit into that, as opposed to trying to fit my life into my career in terms of, I guess, the other choices that people might make. And by contrast, what I then see is, for whatever reason, and I'm not critical of this, but in the circle that I'm in, less men starting in that same way. And so that partnership trajectory, or the moving into an existing business and being promoted through it, still seems a more common process for the men in my circle. Again, there's no right or wrong. I just am really interested that so many women are just going, no, I'm just going to go and do it my way. And I think it is brave, as you say. It is a brave thing to do. It's a courageous thing to do, but it's also a wonderfully exciting thing to do. And a lot of us as lawyers, we're deep planners and overthinkers, save for me, who's clearly not, goes and has a baby without knowing anything about that. And I think you can tie yourself in knots trying to map out what it's going to look like when I open my firm and I do all of these things. But sometimes you've actually just got to do it, don't you? You just got to take the chance and go for it, and intuitively work out when's the moment when I need to hire the next person, and then the next person, and then the next person. It just is such an interesting space at the moment. And I think this is a really exciting space for younger women coming into the profession. We've definitely, in the time that you and I have been in here, seen those gender shifts occurring. And there's still a lot of chatter around, but the leadership space is still, not necessarily balanced in terms of gender and let alone diversity. But then when you step into the smaller boutique space and look at who's leading law firms in that space, I would love to look at the stats, because my observations are there's many more women than men in that space.
I agree.
So, one of the reasons that this show came about was really trying to look at and understand some of the stresses that come with life in the law and what we all do to manage those sorts of things. You've mentioned a couple of things already. One of them was meditation, and that you have a process, by the sounds of it, where you're up in the morning and building a routine around your day. What other tools or what other things or experiences have you had that have helped you to, I guess, work out how to manage some of those stresses?
Yeah, it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, particularly when you're working on stressful cases, and that can become all-consuming. But I have always been a big believer in mindfulness and positive thinking and all of the woo-woo things that are around. And for me, that's incredibly powerful, because it just puts life in perspective when you can realize that while this particular case might be causing you stress, when you look at it in perspective of what everything else positive you've got going on in your life, you actually are probably, less stressed than you realize. It's just that you're focusing your attention on that one particular aspect. So definitely positive thinking, exercise. I know for myself, as soon as I feel that I'm so busy that I've got too much work to do, exercise tends to go out the window. But that's when you need it probably the most. It's those, you need the good endorphins to be able to, energize you to approach those particularly hard cases. And just reaching out to people and creating a community or a village around you. Sharing a problem or ringing up a colleague and saying, oh my gosh, I'm having the worst day, and venting can be so incredibly powerful. And the more that we do that, the more others will realize they can do the same. Sometimes the law can feel like a very competitive space, or people don't want to ask questions because they're worried it's silly. But the more that we speak openly ourselves, I think it'll encourage others to do the same. I certainly know at the DPP, there are a number of colleagues who committed suicide, which is just heartbreaking to me, because if they could only see that the sun will come the next day and just get through that dark moment. Yeah.
Take a deep breath there, you poor thing. I think you're quite right in all of those pieces that you're talking about and the different tools that we can all use. And it is so tragic. I only read yesterday in one of the online forums that a colleague had taken their own life. And again, the impact that you see when that happens on the circle around and the broader circle. I think there are always those moments that make us all go, gosh, like,
oh, definitely, yeah.
And you never obviously know what's going on for anyone else and how much of those decisions is connected to their work or any other stresses that are going on in life. But I echo what you're saying there. I think, again, just the ability to perhaps slow down and be a bit kinder with those around us, and not always perceive that colleagues are there to create havoc for each of us, which, as a family lawyer is sometimes how it feels.
It really does. And I think it's really powerful as a family lawyer to try to let's just change it up. I always think it's not my family. So I have a really powerful position where I can be impartial. I can actually choose the way that I'm communicating and assist the parties by reducing that adversarial nature. I mean, it's hard sometimes if you're in litigation. By nature, it has to be adversarial. But that doesn't mean your communications need to be. And you can be, forceful in presenting your client's position without it then also being aggressive or rude to your colleague. So I think it's finding that right balance. You can be soft and strong, and that's sort of always my approach. Kindness is not weakness. It's actually a display of strength. And so it's finding the way to do that in a balanced way.
Who have been the people that have influenced, I guess, your style of lawyering or your experience in the law in your career?
I'm not too sure, really. I've definitely been drawn to, when I wanted to start my law firm, your podcast. I remember listening to it thinking, okay, what have people done? How did they do it? Where did they go wrong? So the over planner in me. Other law firms doing the new law model. So perhaps giving permission that you can be authentically yourself. You can be Kristal and you can be a lawyer, and there is a market for that. So I guess rejecting that traditional law model and realizing it can be done in a different way and perhaps more client focused. Part of the job I love is meeting people and hearing their stories. So by its nature, I wanted to be very client focused. So perhaps, that's, I think, just having those examples. And the more examples we can give, the more, girls and boys are going to come up with great ideas and realize that they don't have to do things the way it's been done because, just because.
What's the next 10 years of law life look like for you, do you think?
Well, hopefully I create a, successful Central Coast law firm that can help our locals, bring on a few more staff members and create a workplace where everybody's happy to come to work and they feel that they're achieving their goals. Have that work-life integration, not just for me, but for my staff members, and not to just say that we're a flexible working place. I've worked at flexible workplaces, and you try to take a day off to go and see a child's event, and you can't. So to actually be flexible and work out the best way to create a successful business and be happy.
There's some cool goals, and you're quite right. That idea of flexibility is really interesting, isn't it? I think COVID, though, has actually been such a game changer in that
Such a
space.
gift in that respect.
Yeah.
Realize actually we might be more productive working from home and the less interruptions.
That's exactly right. And just the ability now, because I think pretty much every workplace has had to create a model where exactly what you're experiencing right now, the minute they say lockdown, you've got to be able to get people
ready to go.
Yeah, back home working fast. We've got a really nice system in our firm now, because I think we've had 3 lockdowns this year here in Brisbane, where you're told at 10 a.m. from 6 p.m. that night, you're done. So we've got a really good system in our office now. Everyone just goes, okay, fine. We know what that looks like. Here we go, do this, and then revert back to the other. But we always had, people working remotely, albeit our central base was Brisbane. We had people working in various places around the country, and I would have always said that we had a level of flexibility, but I've certainly observed in my own firm, thanks to COVID, the capacity for everyone to just do what works best for them, I think, is really come to the fore. And I've noticed that, I really like working from home. I get a hell of a lot done, and I've been at home mostly the last 2 weeks because it's school holidays here, and I actually just really enjoy listening to my kids, even though I may not be hanging out with them. Just the noise is really comforting.
Yeah.
Whereas I've got other team members that the minute there's a lockdown, it's like, oh God, no. And they're just dying to get back in the office, 2 days later. And it's different for all of us again.
That's right.
But I do think one of the silver linings that will come from this very strange period of time will be that sort of move to exactly what you're talking about, genuine flexibility, like trying to work out what does an individual need to work in their most productive way, and how can a workplace accommodate that?
Yeah. And even in terms of when you're the most productive, I know for me, I am so productive early in the mornings. Other people look at me and think, why on earth would you wake up at that time? I love working at 10 o'clock at night. My brain seems to stop working after at about 7. So I think the more we can embrace people being able to work at their most valuable times, the better.
I agree. There's been a whole lot of articles appearing in my social media feed lately that talk about a 4-day work week. And I'm like, how do we implement the 4-day work week when you and I do court work? So the court, sadly, is not a 4-day work court.
No. I try to take Mondays off, and Murphy's Law is that I always seem to have court on Mondays.
Yeah.
Even when I had Friday off, it was always Fridays.
Yeah, I absolutely. I've accepted that I'm a 5-day worker, and there's not much I can do about that, and that's okay. But I do think, again, the pieces of information that Facebook's feeding me and LinkedIn's feeding me, I'm always conscious that can be a little bit
the universal signs. That's right.
a little bit left of center, is suggesting that businesses are as productive across 4 days rather than 5. And I think I accept that, because I know an example I use all the time is when we set, let's say, a meeting at work. If you tell people that they've got 2 hours to do that meeting, then they will take 2 hours. If you tell them they've got 4 hours, then they will take 4 hours. We're all the same as human beings, those sort of expectations around things. But I think that would be really interesting for the future, to see if we can find ways to create just, I think a permanent 3-day weekend would be life-changing.
Oh, it would be amazing.
So I don't know, maybe that's a petition you and I can create over the next 10 years. Family law courts, we know you're deeply backlogged and have no time to do what you're doing, but we think you should do it in 4 days rather.
We've got an idea.
On that, and you and I do both practice in the family law space, and there's a lot of reform and change. We're about to see our 2 courts, I don't want to say merged, because they don't seem to be being merged. It's actually still quite confusing to me how this will actually play out in live time. But what are your, I guess, thoughts and observations practicing in the family law space about that area of practice?
I was absolutely blown away when I first initially started working in the family law, just in terms of how litigious it really can get in comparison to perhaps the criminal law. You would expect the criminal law to be very adversarial and aggressive by the nature of the, very serious charges you're dealing with. But I found that it was nowhere near as aggressive or adversarial as the family law. And so for me personally, I'm just fascinated that we're placing families in this position where they are litigating and then asking them to go and co-parent for perhaps 10 years afterwards. How do you possibly co-parent with someone when you've gone through that process? So I am always so passionate about my clients avoiding court, because if they avoid court, they're still in control. They get a say of what their future is going to look like, what their parenting arrangements will look like. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. It's not co-perfect. It's just co-parenting. And so I'm just so surprised by, the expense of it all, the time it takes to get outcomes, and just, I think, the emotional toll that it takes on a lot of families who perhaps, if there was a different way or more of a focus on that collaborative practice where we realize, yep, we're in a bad position. How are we going to dig ourselves out together, even if we don't agree on everything? So I think that, staying away from court is always my number one tip.
It's interesting you say that it's a more adversarial, aggressive, I think, model than, say, work in the criminal law system. I compare it, I do a lot of work in the child protection system. And so we have the equivalent of the DPP in the model that is run here in Queensland in the child protection system. And I observe that where you've got that model litigant prosecutor, really, it does completely shift the energy in a case. Whereas in family law, because more often than not it's a mother and a father or a husband and a wife, or whatever relationship dynamic we have, because both of those adversaries are so connected to the outcome, obviously.
That's right.
The energy shifts entirely, and you're quite right that it is I would say it's a more aggressive space than some of the other litigious spaces, and I think it is because it's such a personal thing.
That's right.
that people are being asked to have to dispute over, the two most important things really for all of us, our children and all of the things that we've created in life. You couldn't get anything closer to the heart of any human being.
Everyone's got their truth. Everyone has their version. And so both versions might be true because it's their reality. And so I guess your role as the family lawyers is to try to get them to come closer together in their realities. And so that's what's really hard. Whereas in the criminal law, it's beyond reasonable doubt. There's the elements of the offence. It's all very checklist, if you like. Whereas it's much more grey in the family law.
Yeah, gosh, isn't it? That discretion piece is significant.
Very wide.
Best interests of children, that's a very broad test.
It really
it's very subjectively interpreted from different perspectives.
That's right.
It's interesting, though, again, in my 20 years, I think we have seen and are living through such actually a beautiful shift in the family law space, and generationally we're seeing it. And I certainly have seen it in my practice because we've built a niche practice that really sits in that collaborative space.
Yeah.
And it's like I've seen the energy go from me having to persuade both colleagues and clients about the benefits of models like collaborative practice, mediation, some of these alternate ways of solving challenges in life. Now people ring and say, I'm here for that stuff you do, Clarissa, that friend stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. I want that stuff. And it's just been so interesting watching that complete shift as I think
the message is getting out there.
Yeah, and there aren't too many human beings that I think are actively saying, I really want to go to court and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and fight a battle. But if that's the only option that is sort of publicly
presented,
messaged and available, exactly, presented, much better word, thank you, it does make it really hard to know what the alternatives are, or that there are even alternatives. It's the same as how this conversation began with you and I saying, well, how did you fall into law? And you thinking, well, there isn't really a way for me because I can't go to university. I couldn't manage that. Suddenly there's an alternative presented and away you go. I think that is very much the role of the profession and the leadership organisations now within our profession, is to keep presenting the many alternatives. Litigation is going to be necessary for some families. That's absolutely the case,
That's right.
but not always.
Mm.
And I think we need to just get better at almost, I have a menu that
Yes.
I literally show to my clients. Here is the menu of pathways that you can take. And you pick your dessert menu, here you are.
That's right. Have the entree, or you can have the very expensive steak.
Yeah, that's right. Which of these bespoke meals would you like? I don't know. It's an interesting one. If you had a magic wand, is there one wish or three wishes or something that you would wish for those particularly in the family law space? What change would you make?
I would like to see all people involved in family law matters have to have some sort of counselling or therapy or something like that to navigate the difficulties of a separation. They're going through trauma. So people in trauma, similar to victims, find it really hard to absorb information and to make rational decisions. And so I think that it's so crucial that everyone gets some help to talk through what their feelings are about it all. So then they might actually move forward in their emotions and then be able to make rational decisions. I think that's one thing that I always encourage my clients to do. And I also have concerns about the fact that, people's psychological material or counselling material gets subpoenaed as a matter of course, as just a way to try to undermine somebody. I think we need to really embrace that people seeking help for their mental health is not a weakness, it's a strength, and we should stop trying to perhaps stigmatize it or think of it as a source of evidence. Of course, in some cases, it's going to purely be relevant to the case. But just as a matter of course, similar to sexual assault communication privilege, when that came in New South Wales, not simply being able to get somebody's counselling records when they've been a victim of sexual assault. So perhaps a similar provision in the family law so that people do reach out for help and perhaps avoid some of these terrible atrocities we've seen in the family law. If only they maybe could have spoken to somebody and shared their views, or somebody got some insight into the mental health positions that people were in, we might have been able to avoid some of the horrible situations we've seen.
I think they're two great suggestions that you've made there. When I began in family law, the family law courts had a counselling division internally.
Wow.
And as you filed a parenting case, the parents would go to counselling in the court, and you'd end up with this counselling report that was, not giving all of the insights and back and forth, but just it was like almost a ticker box that there was some opportunities here for resolution, there was some need for some of this, and it was just part of the process. And the whole court was this multidisciplinary model where all of these pieces existed. There was a childcare centre in court, so as parents had to go in for their parenting matter, they could actually check their kids into childcare, heaven forbid, so that they were cared for and they could focus their attention on what they were doing that day. All of these services, it was, I think the approach at the time was different, sadly, to how it is now. But I agree with you. It's so silly for us to think that we can isolate in a human being's mind this decision-making piece around the legal aspects and ignore all of the human pieces that are going on for them. And I think your parallel to the trauma response in the human brain is a really important and significant one for all of us as professionals to remember, because the science tells us that when you're in that stress state, you simply can't make good decisions. It's actually just not humanly possible. And I think about the stressed state that so many of our clients find themselves in, and the pressure that must come when you're particularly on a day in court and in a small room with a lawyer and a barrister saying, hurry up, you've got to decide, this is the last moment, we've got to go in now. Like we ask so much of people. So I think having that broader focus would be so much more helpful. And I echo your thoughts around access of information where people are genuinely trying to address the challenges they have. I've always said family law, as opposed to, say, criminal law, family law is very much a jurisdiction that is about insight, and it is about accepting that human beings are frail beings and we do silly things at times, but what we're interested in is not always so much the silly thing, but the learning that came from it.
That's right.
And what you've done thereafter. And I think you're right. We shouldn't just be, let me just get those records just because. There really does need to be some thought around, well, what are the pros and cons of going down that pathway. And if someone is addressing their concerns and their challenges, then we want them to do that. They're going to be a better person or a better parent, and really encouraging that sort of behaviour, I think. Yeah, that's a really wise one as well. Your favourite things to do when you're not being a lawyer, you're not being a mum, if you could just do anything, how would you spend your time?
Look, this is going to come as a shock, but Below Deck is my weakness. It's a reality show where people are on a boat. It's about the
Below Deck? I've never heard of it.
Below Deck. So many people haven't heard, and then they start watching and they don't know why, but they're also obsessed.
Okay, so tell me more. It's a boat.
So they're on luxury yachts, and it's all about the staff working behind the scenes and then all of the guests that they have to deal with. So it's just so fascinating. Again, probably human behaviour, just seeing that juxtaposition between the people that have to serve and then the people having fun. It's just, yeah, it's great. I sit and watch that for a whole day. I'd binge watch it. Right now it takes me about a week to watch one episode.
Yeah, because you do little bits.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny? I do actually so love the sort of Netflix binge watching model of television that has developed. I don't think I watch normal television at all anymore.
No.
And yeah, go and find myself a series of anything and just get consumed in it.
But once you're a parent, you don't really have that opportunity anymore. Imagine a whole day where you could just sit and
I know.
Netflix.
Imagine.
You need to book a day in a work day and get it done.
Actually, it's Netflix day.
That's right. Very busy today. I'm in a conference.
I'm mediating Below Deck. Final few questions for you, Kristal, and I'll let you go and enjoy your day. But if you were speaking to 16, 17-year-old Kristal, you've really achieved so much in such a short space of time. What would you say to your younger self?
I think I'd just tell myself that it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Like, you're going to be okay. You're enough, and you're going to work it all out. I had so many doubts about, I guess, what my future would look like. And so, yeah, I'm incredibly proud of where I've come.
And my final question, happiness tip or thought or suggestion for everyone listening. What should everyone do in terms of their own happiness?
Probably just not take life so seriously. It's easy to get caught up in the little things in life, but just really count your blessings. Like, look around and see all of, the things that surround you, to have a house, to have food, to have water, all of those basic things that we just take for granted. And maybe just stop chasing. We often think we're going to be happy when something happens, or I'll be happy when I lose weight or when I get that job. But no, you've got to be happy now, and you find the happiness within by realising you're enough just where you are.
Thank you so much. It has been lovely to learn a little bit more about you, and I wish you all the best over the next week of lockdown madness.
Thank you. Homeschooling, I'm excited. I've got a kinder kid, so let's see what that involves.
The Clarissa approach to homeschooling last year was whatever. If this 6 weeks ruins your educative career for the rest of eternity, then I have bigger problems in life. So you do whatever you wish. You could adopt that approach if you like.
I like that. I mean, 4 days is not going to be the end of the world.
You would like to think not, wouldn't you? Like, if it is, then you and I have got some actual challenges that we need to address. But I hope it goes smoothly. And thank you so much.
So nice to talk to you. Bye.
I'm so grateful for this show because it just continues to put me in the path of people that I would otherwise have never met. And every time I speak to someone, there's just some little gem that comes away that makes you go, I hadn't thought about it that way before, or that's just reinforcing something that I've always thought about something. I love podcasts and podcasting, I think, for those selfish reasons. Kristal, thank you so much for joining the show and for sharing so kindly and authentically your life story, both in and outside of law. And I do wish you all the best, both with the current lockdown, but more importantly in building that practice. That sounds like if you can build a practice in the midst of a COVID crisis, then good golly, I can hardly wait to see what you will achieve post-COVID if that time ever seems to appear. And of course, thank you to the College of Law for their ongoing support with the show. And I say it every week, but jump on their website, collaw.edu.au. It's the simplest way to see what's happening. All sorts of different programs at the college available for all of us. And I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you can always find anything I'm running on my website, happylawyerhappylife.com. That's it. Have a wonderful week. Let's hope when you're listening to this, the world has settled down again for us here in Australia and life is a bit back to normal, whatever that means. And if not, I wish you all the best, whatever is going on for you. It just is so bananas, and I don't know what everyone else's experience is. Up here in Brisbane, in part you would say we've been reasonably sheltered, but we keep having these snap lockdowns, and I'm always grateful when the snap lockdown finishes, and it was only a snap lockdown, but it really mucks with how I feel. So I'm conscious that for everyone, we all have our different responses and reactions to these really uncertain weeks that are occurring at the moment. So reach out, look after each other, and I will see you on the airwaves next week.